Hello. It has been quite a while. I think it's probably going to take a few minutes to kind of get the notifications out there. It's been a minute since I've done this, and so I forgot to do the whole create the event thing. So I only just did that like 10 minutes ago, um, and I'm sure just the fun algorithms or whatever are going to lag, but here we are. So I want to welcome you to the first broadcast of the sounding board. And so I just want to welcome everybody to that. Once you pop on, just let me know you're here and we'll get this thing rolling. Um, I just kind of felt like tonight, because it's been quite a while since I've been behind the camera just on my own. I was trying to think the last time I actually did you know, a live broadcast on my own. I've done a lot of collaborative things over the last couple of years, few years, but I think since the last time I was on here on my own, it's probably been about 2 years. Um, so getting the old cobwebs dusted off, but it's a different season. It's a new season. And I'm looking forward to what that looks like. And it looks different for us, doesn't it? Um, so I wanted to just kind of welcome everybody, and I wanted to just kind of um, share just kind of my heart and my vision over this broadcast, over what this may be. Really, what I want it to be is a roundtable conversation, things that are just kind of on my heart, things that I've been, kind of picking up on, seeing, and also if there's things that you would like to just kind of have discussed, I welcome those thoughts and those topics, because what I want this to be is that roundtable conversation over those subjects that might not get talked about too often. And I have a feeling the one that I titled for tonight might end up being either a two-parter or a multi-parter type thing, because I think this can be approached a lot of different ways. I want this to be, a very cohesive conversation. My hope and prayer is that it, brings some healing, maybe some perspective um, to these things. And so that's kind of really where my vision is for this. It's not so much a churchy thing, although we know that I love Jesus, and so that's always going to be a part of my conversation. But I don't necessarily see this as much of a Bible teaching, Bible study kind of thing. But you never know; it might turn into that. But I really want to talk about things like we would if we were, walking around the neighborhood or in a restaurant, or you know just in a room full of people, just a mixed bag of backgrounds and beliefs and all of those things, just a very open forum conversation, to have some very real life conversations, and bringing some, healing, some perspective, and maybe even some strategies to deal with things that are practical as we approach life as we know it, right? Just kind of my background is just that. I've always been kind of very raw, very real. Um, I do my best to be very straightforward. Hi, Gail. Good to see you. Straightforward in every conversation that I have. I'm always open to learn. I've always said that, everybody has something I can learn from them. But I'm also not going to diminish what the Lord has given me in my lease on life. And that is, I also have something to teach as well as learn, right? And so that's really what I want to do. And, a lot of these conversations, is probably going to be some storytelling, right? Because we all have a story, and I love people's stories. I love to hear people's stories. I'm very relational. I like to get to know people, other than a handshake and a hello, right? So that's really my vision with this. And I kind of really just felt talking about this very big, broad subject to start us right out the gate would likely be multi parts because there are so many ways to approach this. The one thing I will not do is I will not bash the church, but I felt like this is something that has fragmented a lot of people and relationships because of maybe mishandling um, of certain things and people. And so I wanted to just kind of approach the topic of mental and emotional health. How does that play into the church? How has the church stepped up to the plate for that? And maybe on the other side of that, how have they not? Um, because I think in the realm of all of this, there is that awful thing that has hurt countless people, and that is the religious abuse that has happened. Hey, Mama Karen, it's so good to see you. I miss you. Um, so that's really what I wanted to talk about because I think every single one of us, have had multiple or even diminish, maybe down to one encounter where, we've had that religious person or a religious institution that has ignored the mental health field or things that you personally are walking through, or they have tried to handle it and they didn't handle it the right way. And so that's really what I wanted to kind of hover around. And so there's just this process of beginning to kind of break down and break off some of the things that might, maybe block your willingness to have these conversations, right? Because there is real pain. And so that's one thing I will not do. As we talk about this, I will not diminish the pain that you have endured. I will not make excuses for those that have inflicted that pain upon you. Um, but I do think in the validating of the pain also comes the other side of that. And I wanted to just pose this question for you because it was one that I had to ask myself. And that question was, how long will I allow that wound to bleed before I actually take care of it? And then how long will I blame the person or people that inflicted that wound to continue to kind of live rent free in my head? How long am I going to carry that anger? How long am I going to carry that grudge? These are real questions that I asked myself. Am I going to continue to allow them in my head, in my thoughts, in my emotions? It's not to devalue the pain or the trauma or whatever it is that is this wound, but it also, there's a point in time where, you know, we have to just go, okay, yes, this person did this or this institution or whatever. Yes, there's real validity with that. But how long am I going to be angry about it and carry the grudge? And it's not to invalidate the atrocities, right? We're not invalidating it. It's choosing how we're going to move forward and leave that in the past. We still have to walk through this. We still have to deal with things, right? Like we still have to process into our healing. And so there's this dividing line I think that we all approach at some point. Either we're going to be ruled by our pain or we are going to heal out of it. And so that is something. Yes. Yes, absolutely, Gail. And that is one task that is very difficult. There are certain things that I have never dealt with, um, nor do I ever want to, but I have walked alongside of people that have. And, sometimes the best thing we can do is just give them a shoulder and not try to give advice. But the forgiveness is definitely a process. And you know what? It's it's not for us to dictate to others how and when and and all of that on how they're going to do that. Um, I've had to forgive um, without apologies, right? I've had to figure out how to forgive somebody, knowing full well I would never get an apology from them for what they did. That's hard, um, but it's possible. And hey, Linda. Hey, Shelly. Good to see you guys on here. It is possible. Um, and if we're on the other side of the coin as the perpetrators of that pain, we don't get to dictate to the people that we hurt how, when, or if they will forgive us. If we've had that, moment where we're, kind of had that come to Jesus moment where we're like, man, I have, you know, created such horrific pain to this person or this person, and you really truly are, repentant, and you really are healing into not being the one that is causing pain. All you can do is offer up that apology if those boundaries have not been set in place. Sometimes people have boundaries, hard and fast boundaries, and you have to respect them. But you can do that apology, and then let your actions be louder than your words. But in all of that, if you were the one that inflicted the pain, you can't dictate to the one you hurt how, when, and how fast they should forgive you. You don't that's just not something you get to do. And I think sometimes people try to force feed their changed behavior in a short amount of time, completely invalidating the pain that they inflicted on the person that is struggling to step into the timeline that they're expecting. I don't know why I felt the need to share that, but I did. So there we go. Um, and so in all of that, I want to just say this, that when we are talking about mental and emotional health, there is healing for every single one of us in that. Whether it's depression, whether it's chronic, diagnosis, whatever it may be, it is a process to healing. And I think sometimes, and this is where I think some of the religious abuses come in, is that I'm going to speak in very broad strokes, okay? And this again is not to um, curse the church in any way, stretch um, of the whatever I'm trying to say. I'm not disparaging the church. I just think the church has always been a hospital, not a country club. And when you have a hospital, you have a building full of broken and sick people. There are people there that are not sick, and that should not be broken, and that is the leadership. And I think sometimes our humanity creeps through, and and that's not something that we're going to get away with or get away from on this side of heaven. But I want to say this: um, I think the church, some, again, broad brushstrokes, have not done as good of a job as they probably could have in dealing with legit mental and emotional struggles. I witnessed firsthand many times in my younger years, people dealing with very intense issues. Um, Back then, we called it multiple personality disorder. Nowadays, the new diagnosis phrase is dissociative identity disorder. And I'm not gonna go through the whole DSM-4, psychological breakdown of that, but the people that deal with that, um, endured a lot. And again, broad brushstroke, a lot of times in the charismatic type churches, they've attributed that to just demonic influence or possession, and that is just not the case. Is there that there sometimes? Yes, but God created our bodies in such a way. I don't know why I'm getting wrecked, but I am because I feel like somebody needs to hear this. Um, God creates our bodies in such an incredible way that in this broken world that we live in, our bodies find a way to cope with those atrocious things that happen to some people. And in that fracturing comes a coping mechanism, and it is not always demonic possession. And you know, and again, that broad brushstroke, many charismatic Pentecostal churches have pigeonholed something that can't be pigeonholed into one thing. And in the inability to control it or cast it out, they, in a sense, further abused, rejected, and neglected that very beautiful person. And so, um, in that broad brushstroke, I think many times the church in the charismatic and Pentecostal realm, um, wants to just speak healing, and their hearts are in the right place. They want to just speak the healing and it be instant. And the instant healing does happen. It is healing all the time. We are healing all the time, and sometimes the instantaneous healing is evident. But then there's other healing that we have to walk through that is a process. And something that the Lord gave me, was about this healing, that yes, it can be instant, okay? But if we relegate the instantaneous healing to that's the only type of healing there is, then we have now diminished what is available to everyone into our ability to understand it and to define it. And we forget that in the process of healing, especially when we're talking about mental and emotional health, the real miracle is in the process. The real miracle of healing is in the discovery of what the fracturing is. See, I can testify to this because I've experienced healing on both sides of that. I've experienced the instant healing. I've experienced the miraculousness of the discovery. And that miraculous instantaneous healing was over my body when I was 19. I was a drug and alcohol addicted, you know, person, and my body was giving up on me. It was literally shutting down. My kidneys, my liver, they were just like they're done. I abused my body so much that I had a doctor telling me, if you don't stop this, you're not it's never going to reverse. Like, you will die, and his diagnosis was very grim. I was jaundiced. I had bruises all over my body from the Lord knows how long. They would not heal. I was severely underweight. If I was 90 pounds dripping wet, I would have been surprised. And this was at 19 years old. Very bad shape because of the abuse that I had put my body through. I literally was living on a death wish. I was suicidal without the gun in my hand. I was a mess. And in this moment of desperation of getting this diagnosis from the doctor of basically you're going to die, or best case scenario, they'll put you on the bottom of a transplant list. Like that's what he was telling me. You're going to have to get organ transplants. It was just that bad. And in that moment and in that diagnosis, something shifted in me where I didn't have that death wish anymore. There was just something in me that says, "You know what? Maybe I don't wanna die." I had already made up my mind that I wasn't gonna live to be 21. I didn't think I would make it to my 21st birthday. But in that diagnosis came the thought of, "Maybe I don't want to." Long story short, I decided to try church again. I had run hard and fast for many years, from the church. I didn't want anything to do with it. Again, religious religious stuff and hypocrisy, and I'll tell that story another day. But I decided to give this God thing a try again, and I went to church. Of course, I got myself really high before I went. Showed up, and the minute I crossed the threshold into that building, I was more sober than I'd ever been in my entire life. Instantaneous freak out session. And then during the session or during the church service, again, that can be a very long story because it's pretty wild and it's just how awesome God is. But at the end of it, I was just white knuckling the back of the chair. I knew I needed to make a change, and I just kind of told the Lord on my terms. And so I'm white knuckling the back of the chair because these crazy church people might grab me and force me to go up to the front, and I was not going to do that. Um, but I just kind of in my heart was like, okay, God, I'm here. I just I need your help. And so I closed my eyes and I said, "Dear God," I don't remember nothing else after that. And when I came to, I was up at the front. Don't know how I got there. Nobody grabbed me. Nobody pulled me out there. It was definitely a divine situation, and I was laid out on the floor, which is the one thing I was terrified of happening to me, but it happened, and I laugh about it now, but I was not humiliated. I want to just share that little nugget. I was not humiliated. I was met with kindness. My parents were there, and they were praying over me. The pastor of the church was there praying over me, and some of my parents' friends were praying over me as well. Um, but the entire church was already emptied. I was the last one there. Like, that's how long it took for that, I don't wanna call it deliverance, but that's really what it was, um, because as my mom put it, she could smell, like, the death come off of my body, and in that moment and in that instant, I no longer had the withdrawals that I was dealing with. I couldn't not drink before that day. I had to have a drink in the morning. I had to keep drinking throughout the day to prevent all of those withdrawal symptoms that happen, and I was instantly healed. All of those bruises that were on my body disappeared. They were just instantly gone. Um, my coloring was jaundice, like yellow, but also I looked like death. There's like this ashen grayness to my face, and that was gone. It was instantaneous, instant healing. But in that, had to start the journey of the process of healing too. That process of healing is what I say about every person that has an addiction problem. The addiction is the leaf on the tree. What's at the root? There is a root cause for addiction. It's not just because the drugs and alcohol are addictive in nature, although they are that. but there is something internally, in my opinion, that justifies the desire to continue to feel that high, to feel, you know, kind of in that escaping place. And so there is a root cause because no child dreams of becoming a drug addict or an alcoholic. That's not on the child, list of, you know, things to aspire to. And so I had to begin the journey of digging into the root of that addiction tree. And I didn't do that for a while. And so a good chunk of my, young adult years, in my 20s plus, I would say I lived very fractured. Um and that's another story for another day. It's just very long-winded, so like when somebody asks you at your testimony, you're like, I don't know what part. Um but it was a fractured living, and then some things in my life transpired, losing my mom. Um Probably was the catalyst into that intentional journey of healing, that healing discovery healing, right? And so I went through the process of that, and that was a beautiful and painful journey. I'm not going to lie. It was painful, but it was beautiful because in that, uncovering all of the things that fractured me back here, that caused me to kind of live in this fractured way. But once I got to this place where I began the process, I had to be intentional, and I had to do that, like what that scripture says about setting my face as flint. I was not going to get deterred from this journey. Did I want it to be instant? Yes, because in that moment, in all of that upheaval in my life, I just wanted it to be gone. I just wanted to escape. I just wanted it to be over, but I knew in my the deepest being that I knew I had to look at this stuff one at a time. One thing at a time. It was not easy, but it was so beautiful because the treasure hunt that I went on, although the things that I dug up were ugly, and they, like if you were to dig something up out of the ground, it's ugly, it's covered in mud, it's rusted, it's all of these gross things, right? But when you take that thing that you just dug up and you clean it all off and you begin to polish it up, it's not this nasty lump of clay that's deteriorated over time, but it is now being polished into something beautiful. And you're like, oh my gosh, I remember this now. Because I'm going to say this, the trauma that fractured me back here caused me to only remember the trauma. I could not remember a lot of the good things that happened back here. I had repressed memories. I had all of these crazy things that had happened. And I'm going to say this when I mention the word trauma, because I think it is overused, and I think in a way it is ignorantly used. And I'm going to just kind of state why I say that. Because what traumatized me back here didn't necessarily traumatize my siblings, right? And what may traumatize someone else may be a nothing burger in your life, right? See, we are all created differently. We all adapt to environmental changes and relationships and interactions. We all deal with things differently. And what traumatizes one person may not even affect another. And so when I hear the word trauma, I legit want to know their definition of what that is to them, because it might not sound like trauma to me. Knowing that I've been through some things, I don't want to diminish what their definition of that is. Okay. So I had to say that. So in this discovery, I began to slowly heal. And in this slow healing was a really beautiful treasure hunt. It wasn't fun at times. It was hard work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's hard work when you dig into things and you have to look at really ugly things and you have to kind of sometimes you have to relive those so that you can heal from it, right? It's like a wound. Like for example, you went in for surgery and some reason somehow it does happen in surgery there was something that got left in the like say they had you cut, like open and they left like a gauze thing in your body, but they stitched you back up and got you back to your room to recover, and all of a sudden now you have an infection. And they're like, "Why did she have an infection?" So they've got to go through this whole gamut of tests and they're checking all these things. And you're like, they're like, "Well, I don't see anything here. I don't see anything here. I don't see anything here." And you're like, "I don't know what it is, but something is not right. I don't feel right. Something's off." That's how I felt. I never felt right. I never felt like 100% comfortable in my own skin. I was never 100% confident in who I really was. I couldn't tell you who I was. I couldn't really tell you what my dreams and aspirations were. I could tell you certain things, but I still was unsure of it. It was that gauze that was left in me that fractured me back here, that caused this infection, this long lasting kind of thing. So then you have to kind of go back. Oh, well, we found it. We have to go back in order to remove it. So that's what this is, right? So you go back in, and then once that's removed, the source of the infection is now gone, but now you have to process through the healing so that you heal properly, right? Because nothing was healing properly before, it was just there, right? So that's what this is. And there's a real beauty in the discovery of this, right? And so that's what this is. And so I just wanted to share that because I felt like there's so many people that are trying to hash out what they're mentally and emotionally dealing with, and you're doing the right things by going to, like if you are a churchgoer and you're going to the church and you're asking, for some advice or for some counseling, or you're finding some folks that offer up coaching, or whatever it is, you're trying to find all these things and sometimes you're met with ignorance. Can I just say a lot of people are ignorant to what you may be doing, and they're just kind of giving you some advice that they got, and it's not quite fitting what you're needing. Um, because I think a lot of times there's a lot of ignorance um, about this, like when someone tells me they're dealing with depression, like, I'm asking them, is it situational? Is it just a situation that you're dealing with right now that is creating some depression in your life? Or is this beyond a situation? Is it a broader circumstance? Or is this, do you have seasonal depression? Some people have that. Or is it clinical, right? There's all of these scopes of one thing that we call depression. And so it's a lot of these questions that we need to ask. And I think sometimes a lot of time, again, this is broad brushstroke, that we're met with ignorance. And in that ignorance comes judgment. In that ignorance comes, here, let me throw like 10 Bible verses at you. That's really great. I need some scriptures. I think that that would help, but it's not everything that I need right now. I need those scriptures, but I need other things too. And so I think in some of the the heart is in the right place in offering up the scriptures and offering up that advice. But I think in that there's also some ignorance. And sometimes we unknowingly allow our ignorance to further wound others. And so that has happened a lot in the church. And in that setting, this religious type spirit of things comes in and begins to almost use a whipping like feeling to that person. It almost feels like you got more beat up going into the church with your problems than you felt before you went there. And I can empathize and sympathize with you on that because I have dealt with that. And I have watched it happen with others. And so I guess I just want to bring some like highlights to some things tonight. Again, I think, this is probably going to need to be two parts, but um I think if we can circle back around to the process and how that forgiveness and stuff happens. If we can break it down into a couple of things, we've got broken people versus healed that are within that hospital of a church. And we also have a religious thing happening, or we can find a relationship thing happening. There are vast differences between those. And I will say this, when I was 19 and I had that miraculous body healing, I didn't realize I didn't have the wisdom that I have now about the fracturing. I didn't have the picture of the root system that grew that tree of addiction back then. I just thought I was healed and all was right with the world, and began to kind of repair my relationship with my parents and my siblings and so on and so forth. But in that, I was also pigeonholed into these labels, and I think many of us, especially in this world, people are all about the labels, and I didn't like the perception that I was being labeled as, this former drug addict and alcoholic, and I was that, but I didn't feel like that's who I was anymore because my body was healed, right? Like, I'm not drinking anymore. I'm not doing drugs anymore. It doesn't matter that I'm still smoking my cigarettes. Why are you judging me? Why y'all judging me? I my mouth was still, a work in progress. I still sounded like I was, living on the streets. I'm cussing out the pastor's wife or the youth pastor's wife in the sanctuary because she pushed on me too hard and it ticked me off, and I was really rough around the edges, and I just didn't feel like I belonged, you know and yes, Veronica, it just felt like more shame, and as I kept going and kept pushing, I set my face as flint because in my book, the God that I ran from was the one that showed up in a very real way for me and miraculously healed me. So I, in that moment, set my face as flint, and I just was like, I don't care what these fools say to me. I'm coming to this building because I want to learn. Like I was just like tunnel visioned, laser focused. But even in that, I couldn't completely block out that these people, I don't think they knew it. To be honest, I don't believe that they knew that was how they were leaving me feeling, but I just didn't feel like I fit in. I felt like I was the dirty penny, I felt like no one's ever gonna like fully accept me in this change because they're always gonna view me as this rough and tumble former drug addict, former alcoholic, not worthy of any of these good Christian boys, all of these things that you talk about when you're 19 and 20. It was just all of this yuck, but I did my best to ignore it because I had experienced that instantaneous healing, and but I knew I needed to process through some things. Again, I knew that there was more healing that was for me on the other side of the miracle, that instant miracle. And so I just started devouring my Bible. Like I didn't care about the ignorant people around me. I did and I didn't. I'll be honest. I did and I didn't. But I was not going to allow that ignorance or even my perceived interpretation of what they were saying or treating me. Um, I wasn't going to let it deter me from the mission that I was on. And that mission at that time was to be a better person than what I was. And I think we can take that and we can really apply it everywhere. I will say this, like when we're talking about mental health, emotional health, you have to find, you know, not the ignorant ones, not the religious ones, but the ones that are good at being quiet and just listening, the ones that desire relationship, the ones that will step into the mess or into the confusion and not, grab their Bible and whack you upside the head with it, but just say, "Hey, you know what? This scripture actually like helped me, but this is what else I did in the process." And I'm the first to say, after living, kind of in this fractured way for a good, you know, 10 plus years, once I finally, had all this upheaval and I what did it is I didn't know how to grieve my mom and her dying and all of the stuff that happened at that point in time. And that left me going, okay, why can't I process through this? Why am I struggling? And so all of this stuff, and then like I said, there's another story for another day, but there was a massive upheaval in my life at that point in time. And it was in that moment that I was like, okay, I have to find something that will help me figure out why I why I got like how and why I'm here at this point in time, like the way I am. I felt like such a disaster. And so I am the first person to say finding a really good mental health counselor that changed my life. And that helped unlock that hidden box, that hidden closet that I didn't know about in order to become that unfractured person. And in all of this, I can say that this journey is a miracle in of itself. It wasn't instant, but it was still a miracle. And I want to just encourage you guys in that because I know that life has just been very difficult, especially, can I just say over the last 5 years? I know it was difficult before that, but it's been difficult, very intense over the last 5 years, intense relationally, intense inside and outside the church. I mean, every facet of our lives has been intensely affected. And I think the main key is acknowledging and not diminishing what you're experiencing in your mental and emotional health. And I will say this because I have been guilty of it, and I want to encourage you to not perpetuate the cycle of diminishing what you're actually going through in order to feel or appear as though you've got all your stuff together. The whole keeping up with the Joneses doesn't just mean having that the material stuff. It is also keeping up with the Joneses of looking like you've got all your ducks in a row. I've never had ducks, they're squirrels and they're at a rave. Just saying. Um, but also unwilling to acknowledge to those. I mean, the refusal to be vulnerable. I'm not saying share everything with everyone, you know. My life is an open book, but I don't live out loud. I am still a private person, but I'm very honest about what I'm going through. So when I say I'm in one of the most difficult seasons of my life, I ain't lying. I have dealt with depression with an intensity that I have never dealt with in my life. And it comes in waves, but I have been walking through counseling as well. And I don't mind saying that. There's no shame in that game. It's like we need help. We need help at times. And this this helps, but so do other people. And so do people that have a skill set that are able to ask the right questions in the right way to kind of help you rediscover maybe what's hindering or blocking those things that you're trying to get around or over, that you're just not quite sure how to do that. Right. And so, you know, I just feel like if we can just remove the embarrassment and shame over things that happen back here or things that are happening in the now, in order to allow us to discover the beauty of the process and the miracle of the process, and just being honest with ourselves and not diminishing something that we're walking through in order to appear more holy. And I felt like that in of itself is such an abuse to your own journey, because you're trying to appear for other people who might not even be looking. So I want to just kind of begin to wrap this up tonight, because I feel like if I start talking about anything else, this is going to go way longer than an hour. I will pick this up. I will do a part two for next week, because I can already tell you the week after that, on the 24th, I will not be doing a broadcast. It is my son Jaden's birthday. And so I'm not going to do that on his birthday. But we will do part two of this next week. And if there's something specific that you guys would like me to touch on in the mental health, emotional health realm, um, as it correlates to the church or even outside of the church. I think maybe I'll dive a little deeper into some religious abuses and things like that. But I really want to. I really want to do this in an honoring way, and so because the church is a beautiful thing. And I think the church now is healing into the place that it should have always been. And my prayer in that is more inviting to those that are really struggling. And this even goes into, just lifestyle and choices and things that have happened. And we'll just dive into that more next week. But if there's something specific, I please message me on here, or you can message me privately. Um, and then I want to just offer up privately. Um, I'm gonna open up the ability to register to do the sounding board sessions. Those are going to be private one-on-one sessions, just you and me talking about whatever it is that you want to talk about. But I'm going to say this. I want you, before you do that, I want you to think about what you want to talk about for one. I want you to have a plan of action, because this is for you. This is for you. This is for your process. This is for you to just kind of verbally process what it is that you want to talk about, right? So think about that. And then the second thing I want you to think about is, what is your goal and what do you want to get out of that session or sessions? Okay? Because this is you doing the work. And the Lord is just putting me in a place to be a sounding board for you. Two listening ears, two shoulders to cry on, only one mouth. Okay. So that's, I'm going to offer that up. And for some reason, I couldn't get my calendar to connect with my website. So what it'll do is you'll order the session, and then it'll message me, and then in that I want to make sure I've got your email, and I will message you the calendar, and we can kind of talk about what day or time where we can get our calendars to match up. I will say this: I will offer quite a bit of time to choose from, but my time with my kids will always take precedence. So there is that. But you can go onto my website. Oh, you know what? I forgot this little handy dandy thing. See, I'm relearning this. It's been way too long. Um, Let me see here. Where was that little tabby thing? It is there. Here we go. Okay. So you can go to my website, and under the resources tab is the sounding board sessions. And that's where you'll be able to book one or three or however many you want to do. And then we can message back and forth um, and get that hashed out and get going on that. But I will say I will not do the work for you. And who knows what will come out of that session. And I already had someone just try and get some clarity because they had only heard something in part. But this is not pay for prophetic words. I am not the Zoltar machine. You don't put a quarter in and get a gumball, okay? So that's not what this is. This is legit, just talking about life and what we're dealing with. And so um, I'm really looking forward to that. That's not something that I had in mind when I was getting kind of pulled back into doing these broadcasts, but I really felt the Lord wanted me to offer that up. So it was His idea. I'm just being obedient with it. So, with that said, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you for joining in tonight. Thank you for participating in this conversation. Thank you for sending me, more things to talk about because I want to talk about what's important to you. I want to, have those difficult conversations. I think, some of the negativity with churches is that, the Lord and all things of heaven, there is an order to things. But I think what we've done as, you know, as men, we have taken the order of heaven and we have, in a sense, replicated it, but then kind of made it our own. And I think in that we've corrupted a little bit of things, and in that, the that religious thing tends to corrupt stuff. And one thing I will not do is I will not bend my knee to the religious spirit. And I will talk about the hard things. I will talk about the uncomfortable things. Just like I tell my kids, there is nothing that you can't come to the table with. We might be embarrassed. We might laugh. We might not want to talk about it. Might be really hard. Might be doing a lot of crying, but we're going to talk about it. And that's really what I want to see with this round table place. I want to have those difficult conversations. So my question for you guys, for this next one and for the ones to come, what are some topics that you would really like to hear talked about? And it won't always just be me. I'll be bringing other people on that can offer up other perspectives as well because I think the more conversation and the more perspectives that we get, the more we can learn, and the more we can grow, and the more we can heal. And having great communication, I think, is the best place to start healing places and societies and all of these things that have been so fractured because of poor communication. and poor perception, fractured perceptions. It's like some of these folks are looking at things through one of those kaleidoscope thingies. It's like, can you even see a clear picture of how you're looking at things? And it's going to be clear, concise, articulation of things that I think will help bring healing and clarity to many things within the church, outside the church, and just in real life. So, yes, unclogging the clogged pipes. I like that, Philomena. That's, I love that. Okay. All right, you guys. I love you. Thank you so much for joining. And I will see you next week, next Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern. All right. Take care.